Hi, everybody. It's Miss Lishia. It's May 20th, and we've come to the genetics and heredity portion of the genetics unit. Miss Vania walked you through Monday and Tuesday some important vocabulary words that you needed to know for this unit. So, genetics and heredity should be familiar to you. If they're not, we're going to touch briefly on their meanings before going too far into this slideshow. Okay. Genetics, if you look at that word, you see the root word gene. So anytime you see or hear the word gene or genetics, it's referring to a specific part of DNA. Okay. Genes are found in your DNA. Those genes are responsible for the development of your traits, whether you're going to have blue eyes and blonde hair or brown eyes and brown hair. And heredity just means how those traits are passed down from generation to generation. If you look at the little girl in the picture, you'll see that she can curl her tongue. Um, she can curl her tongue because her genes say that she can. She has the genes, I can curl my tongue gene. Okay. Heredity means that she got that from a parent or a grandparent. Okay. Now, you heard me mention DNA. The genes are found in your DNA. So, before we talk about blonde hair and blue eyes and how to curl your tongue or the genes to curl your tongue, we have to understand where those traits come from. The traits come from your DNA. DNA is an acronym that stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. That is a very long word, and we don't want to say it every time we're referring to DNA, so we made an acronym for it. You can see where we got the D, you can see where we got the N and the A. A few facts about DNA is it is a long molecule contained in the nucleus of every cell of every living thing. Now, I just said two words that you might not be familiar with, molecule and nucleus. When I'm saying molecule, I'm just referring to um, atoms. You remember atoms from states of matter? A molecule is formed when atoms come together, cluster together, and are kind of stick together. When those atoms come together, it forms a molecule. Now, a nucleus is the center and the most important part of a cell. Okay, we all are made up of cells, and in every one of those cells is a nucleus, and in every one of those nucleuses is our DNA. Our DNA contains all the information about how a living thing will look and function. Every living thing has a unique set of DNA, every human, animal, or plant. It is what makes you you. Your DNA is responsible for making you a boy or a girl, brown hair, blonde hair. It is what makes up, it was what decides if you're a person, a raccoon, or a tree. Okay. Let's look inside DNA really quickly. It's hard to teach just enough to get you by fifth grade. When we talk about DNA, I kind of want to teach everything. It's kind of like one of those nesting dolls where you open it up and there's another doll inside the doll, and you open up that doll and there's another doll inside that doll. That's the way DNA is. When you start to look at DNA, there's so much inside the DNA. And then when you get inside the DNA and you find the chromosome, well, there's something inside the chromosome. And then inside the gene or inside the chromosome, there's a gene. And inside of the gene, there's, something else. So it's kind of it's a lot of information I get. But let's just focus on chromosomes and genes for now, okay? There's two diagrams that I'll get to in a minute. What I want you to focus on right now are the two definitions on your screen. Chromosomes, they are compacted coils of DNA that contain genetic information. Gene is a specific piece of a chromosome that contains instructions on how to make protein. All right, let's take a deep breath. Chromosomes, if we look over here to the diagram, this purple X here is a chromosome. Okay. When it says that a chromosome is compacted coils, look at this diagram. Do you see how it looks like coils that are curled up and compacted together. Okay, that is what a chromosome looks like. It is compacted coils, and what those coils are DNA. If I pulled one of those strands out and kept going, look, we're getting more zoomed in and more zoomed in. Look at what I finally get, a twisted ladder. Do you see that? So those coils that make up a chromosome are just these twisted ladders all compacted to make a coil, and the coil makes up the chromosome. Okay, told you, those nesting dolls. All right. Now the gene is inside the DNA, is inside the chromosome. If we look at this diagram, I've taken, okay, sorry, this little thing is popping up. There we go. I've taken the same X chromosome and highlighted the bottom to show you where a gene might be located. Okay, so a gene is just a specific piece of a chromosome that contains instructions on how to make protein. Now, to explain that a step further, proteins make cells. Okay, so depending on what the instructions tell the cells is going to depict how the cells make up your tissue and how your tissue makes up your organs and how your organs make up your body. Okay. So, a lot of the times we refer to DNA as a recipe or an instruction manual. If you've ever watched the Jurassic Park movies, you might have heard the scientists in those movies refer to DNA as the recipe for these dinosaurs. Okay. And all that means is it's the makeup of what they are. If I'm cooking a strawberry cake and I put in flour, oil, sugar, and eggs and strawberries, I'm not going to pull out of the oven an orange cake or a pretzel, right? I'm going to get a strawberry cake because those were the ingredients that I put into this recipe to get my strawberry cake. If your genes say that you have blonde hair and blue eyes, you're not going to have brown hair and green eyes. So that's why we refer to it as an instruction manual or a recipe. Your chromosomes are just following the instructions of the genes, what the genes say you look like. All right, hope I've explained that well enough. Let's move on. All living things have DNA. DNA is passed on from biological parents to their offspring. Biological meaning these are the two people you came from. It's not a step parent, it's not a grandparent. These are the two people that you came from, and you are their offspring, meaning they reproduced you, okay? You are their child. DNA can replicate itself, meaning it can make a copy of itself. And this is how it's passed down to generations. When it makes a copy of itself, it passes down those instructions from generation to generation. Okay, again, let's take a deep breath. And I've kind of summed up how all of these terms are connected. You've heard so many new terms in this video: genes, chromosomes, DNA, cells, tissue, nucleus, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to connect it for you now in these 7 steps. Okay. Here's our nesting doll, if you will. Okay. So pretend you have your nesting doll, all right, in your hand. And we've got the smallest nesting doll. She is our gene, all right? And our genes make up our chromosomes. So we're going to put her in the next doll, all right? And then our chromosomes are inside our DNA. So we're going to put it into the next doll. And then the DNA is inside our cells, and our cells make up our tissue, And our tissues make up our organs, and our organs make up our body. It all starts with genes that are handed down from our parents. All right, so we've learned all about DNA, how we get it, where it comes from, where it's found in our body, all that juicy good stuff. Now, this brings me to talking about different traits. This slide says, how are offspring like their parents? Let's look at the picture next. Let's compare and contrast this mama tiger or grandma tiger with this baby cub. Okay. We can see that it has whiskers like its parent. We can see it has stripes. We can see it has the same coloring. They're walking on all fours. They have the same ears, the same eye color, the same nose. There are a lot of similarities between these two animals. So we can assume that this is the offspring of this tiger. Those things that I just listed, like the stripes, the whiskers, the coloring, the way it walks, those are traits. We all have traits, okay? And traits are just characteristics. They're how you look, they're things about you. Traits are personal characteristics. They're things about you, such as how you look or what you like. A characteristic of an organism may be inherited or acquired. This is information that you have to know in order to move on in our genetics unit. Is a trait an inherited trait or an acquired trait? And that is two of your vocabulary words. And if you're not familiar with them, let's talk about what they mean. Inherited means that you got it from a parent. It was passed down to you. Acquired means that you learned it over time, or maybe it was something that happened to you later in life. Maybe it was something that took time to develop, something that you learned, okay? That is acquired. You are a unique individual. You have lots of characteristics about you, and those characteristics are called traits. Some examples of traits are eye color or basketball skills. Let's focus on inherited traits. Inherited traits are traits received from your biological parents through the DNA or genes in the sperm and egg cells. Examples of inherited traits would be natural eye color, hair color, height, and blood type. If you look at the picture of the family in the top right corner, you can see that the little girl got a lot of her traits from her mother and her father. Her hair color is the same, her eye color is the same, as well as her skin color. She looks like her biological parent. Other than eye color, hair color, and skin color, you can get your height from your parents, your foot size, moles, birthmarks, and freckles. A lot of you have pointed out during the year my birthmark that is in my eyebrow. Some kids think that it's something that happened to me, like, oh, what did you do, Miss Lishia? What did you do to your eyebrow? And I have to tell them that it's a birthmark. It was something that I was born with. But the cool thing is that me and my brother both have the same birthmark in our eyebrow. It's somewhere along the line of our ancestry. Somebody probably had the same birthmark, and we received those genes from either our mother or our father. You can also inherit diseases or conditions from your ancestors. So if you have a family history of high blood pressure, or maybe you have a family history of people that have high cholesterol, you might have those same issues later on in life as well. That's why when you visit the doctor, sometimes they ask you, what does your family, do you have a family history of diabetes or arthritis or anything like that. Let's move on to acquired traits. Acquired traits are different from inherited. Inherited means that you received it from a family member. Um, Acquired means that you developed whatever the trait is during your lifetime. It was not something that you were born with. Now, I don't like to say that inherited, the definition of inherited means that you were born with it, because sometimes our babies can be born with something that they didn't necessarily inherit from a mother or a father. But acquired, that one of the ways that you know whether this trait is acquired or not is you can say, was I born with it? Were they born with it? That is a good indication to ask yourself, is it something that they were born with? Okay. If it's not, then it is an acquired trait. Some examples of those things would be learning how to ride a bike, read, or write. You aren't born knowing how to do those things, they were taught to you. Some other acquired traits would be having short hair. We decide after we're born if we're going to have long hair or short hair, what hairstyle we're going to have. We don't inherit a hairstyle from a family member. Okay, if your dad has crazy spiky hair, you're not going to be born with crazy spiky hair. If you have an accident in your lifetime, and maybe this is kind of extreme, but it says cut off finger. Uh, if you have an accident and a finger is cut off, your child is not going to be born with that finger missing. So, those are all acquired traits, things that you were not born with. Examples of learned traits or behaviors would be your mannerisms. We can all learn how to, move our hands or walk or even turn our head a certain way. We can all learn those things from other people. Mannerisms is just another word for, movement or behavior. Language is also another learned trait, an acquired trait. You're not born knowing how to speak Spanish or English. Your family taught it to you. Religion is another acquired trait. It is something about you. It's a characteristic of who you are, but it wasn't something that you inherited from a family member. Food preferences, music likes and dislikes, and favorite sports. Those are all choices that we make for ourselves. Um, Thank goodness we can make those choices for ourselves and that they are not inherited from our family members. Thank goodness we have a little bit of control over our own identity. That way, if we're not pleased with the behavior or the choices of a family member, we can change that for ourselves and help ourselves have a better life. Acquired traits end with you. So, just like I was saying about if you have an accident and you have um, maybe a scar from the accident, your child is not going to have the same scar. It can't Acquired traits cannot be passed on to your offspring. It's not in your DNA, it's not in your genes. For example, and this is kind of extreme, but your kids won't be born with a missing arm if you cut off your arm first. Now, some traits can be both. All right. Where would we be if this wasn't confusing? We have to confuse you at some point. Some traits can be both. For example, skin color. Skin color can be inherited from a family member, but it can also be acquired, meaning you can go to the beach and get a suntan and your skin can darken. Okay. That doesn't mean that you inherited that from a family member. That means you went to the beach and got a suntan. That was acquired. An example of an inherited trait would be something like a dimple, okay? This is something that this child was born with. You cannot learn how to have a dimple. There's nothing that you can do. Like you can't sit with a pencil stuck in your cheek for hours on hours and expect for your face to form a dimple naturally from now on. It's either something that you are born with or you're not. Okay. This is an example of an inherited trait. We're going to do a couple traits as a practice and an exercise to see if we've learned what the differences are between the two. So if you will do me a big favor, go grab a pencil and a piece of paper. And as I go through these, I want you to write down an I or an A, meaning I for inherited or A for acquired, and see if you get these right as we go through them. All right, number one, someone is bilingual. Am I going to give that an I for inherited or an A for acquired? Someone is bilingual is an acquired trait. They learned it. They learned how to speak English or Spanish. It was not something they were born with. Number two, you know how to swim. Number two is also an acquired trait. This was not something that was passed down from generation to generation. Number three, you have a hitchhiker's thumb. A hitchhiker's thumb is shown in the picture below. Is this an inherited trait or an acquired trait? If you answered I for inherited, you would be exactly right. Take a look at your own thumb, hold it up, see if you have a hitchhiker's thumb or not. Is it straight or does it go back a bit? If it goes back a bit, you have what they call a hitchhiker's thumb, and that is inherited. Number four, a man is blinded from a firework accident. Is that I for inherited or A for acquired? If you answered A, you would be exactly right. Obviously, this wasn't anything that he inherited from a family member. He was blinded due to an accident with fireworks later on in his life. Now, since it's an acquired trait, do you see how if this man had offspring or had children, they would not be blind because he is blind? Do you see that? It's an acquired trait. He did not inherit it, nor can he pass it on to his children. It's not in his DNA. Number five, Sarah can roll her tongue. Is this something that can be found in her DNA? Is it inherited or acquired? If you're paying attention at the beginning of the video, you will remember that it is inherited. She has the gene that is required to have this skill. If you can curl your tongue, it is because you have the curl your tongue gene, okay? Somewhere in your DNA, in your instruction manual. When the recipe was being made to make you, someone threw in the bowl, yeah, he can roll his tongue. Let's give him that skill, okay? Number six, you have calluses on your feet. I for inherited or A for acquired. You said acquired, you'd be exactly right. This is something that develops over time. This was not something that was passed down to you from your parents. Number seven, a pea plant has purple flowers. Inherited or acquired? This would also be inherited from the time that that pea plant sprouted up from the ground. It already knew it was going to have purple flowers. My daughter, from the day she was born, she has had characteristics about her that have not changed over the 6 years of her life. So there is just some things about you that is ingrained in your DNA, and does not change over time. And those are your inherited traits. Right? You know, I had to throw some Harry Potter in here somewhere, right? So let's think about Harry for a second. He's got a scar from um, He Who Will Not Be Named on his forehead. Okay. Is that scar something that he got from his parents? And if Harry and Ginny ever had children, would his children have a scar on their forehead? I hope you said it was an acquired trait because that is definitely something that he got from Dumbledore. It was not something he got from his parents, and it cannot be passed on to his children. Number 9, a bush has trimmed limbs. Acquired trait or inherited trait? Acquired trait. Those limbs did not, or those bushes did not grow like that. Someone went out there with a hedger and hedged up those bushes to look like that. Let's look at this poor little mouse with a cut tail. Okay. This is the exact reason why I don't like to use the verbiage of were you born with it? When you're trying to decide whether a trait is inherited or acquired, always ask yourself, is this something that was handed down from a parent? Or is this something that was learned? The mouse with the cut tail is um, acquired. There we go. Acquired trait. It might have been something they were born with, but it's not something that they were passed down from that they got from their parents. Okay. So you have to think about, is it something that they got from their parents or that they could pass on to their offspring? If this little mouse ever had offspring, had children, it doesn't mean that they would necessarily have a tail like that either. So it can kind of get confusing there for a little, on some situations. A brown calf has brown parents. Is that acquired or inherited? It is inherited. A fish has gills to breathe underwater. That is inherited. A tree bent. You see how that tree is bent? And that tree is bent due to winds, harsh winds blowing. Is that acquired or inherited? Did they get it um, from your tree doesn't really have parents, but did they inherit it from generations past? And can they pass it on to offspring? Can the little acorns that fall from this tree and blow in the wind and get planted in the earth, when those acorns sprout and grow, are they going to grow crooked? That question should have helped us find the answer of acquired. This was something due to the environment around it. It has this trait, yes, it's bent, okay, but it's bent because of the harsh winds. All right, that is it for me today. Hopefully, you can think of um, some acquired and inherited traits for yourself. Below the A's and I's that you wrote during the slideshow, write down 2 or 3 inherited traits that you know are inherited about yourself, and also write down a couple, 2 or 3 acquired traits about yourself as well. Things about you, they are characteristics about you, but they weren't something that was handed down to you from past generations. All right, guys, good luck with everything. I wish you well. And tomorrow, Miss Hall will have a video for you on sorry, dominant and recessive genes. So don't forget that vocabulary word, genes or genetic, because you're going to be talking a little bit more about genes tomorrow. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye bye.